Welcome to TIDES, where we explore the intersection of technology, innovation, and the future of work. Today, we are thrilled to have Kree Govender, Area Lead at Microsoft Canada, and an AI evangelist join us for a conversation about the AI-driven workplace. Together, we will discuss how AI is transforming decision-making, reshaping our work environments, and preparing the workforce for the future. Thank you, Kree, for being with us here today.
It's a topic that's very close to my heart, as I'm sure it is for many people that are there today. So hopefully we can add some value to them.
I'm sure. So let's get started. Artificial intelligence isn't just a buzzword. It's transforming how we work, make decisions, and interact in the workplace. And many companies are either already implementing or are actively exploring AI solutions to enhance their operations. And as businesses navigate digital transformation, AI is emerging as that critical tool for improving efficiency, and also for enabling smarter decision making and reshaping workplace cultures. So, Kree, in your experience, how would you define an AI driven workplace and why is it crucial for organizations today?
The AI revolution, as we're experiencing it, is really one of those pivotal moments in time. We've had some of those big moments in tech, like the internet, cloud computing, and now it's AI, or really the emergence of generative AI and what that represents for us. For a while, I'm sure that there were swathes of people who actually thought this is just a hype cycle, this is going to die down in the same way that we had a hype cycle around like NFTs and the metaverse. But that is most assuredly not the case. We're seeing things being written into law right now as it relates to AI. So this doesn't just affect us in the workplace, but it also affects us in terms of how we operate in the world as citizens as well. So with that, really as some framing and as a backdrop, an AI-driven workplace, if we have to zone into that, is one where AI is seamlessly integrated into our decision-making. Whether it's operations and workflows, helping us make smarter decisions, it's really about an aspect of efficiency, moving faster, needing to leverage the technology to do work for us through an agentive fashion right now. And it's not just about automation. We used to have RPA, robotic process automation, and it's really not about that. Now we can operate with largely vague sets of data, vague queries, and still drive out the type of outcomes that we want. So as we move into this as an era. And it's crucial today because AI really enhances productivity. It creates much richer personal experiences, and it ultimately empowers organizations to not just stay agile, drive down costs, and also differentiate with new product offerings. So the environment is changing quite rapidly. And I truly believe that companies that embrace AI are better positioned both for innovation as well as to thrive in the future.
Mm-hmm. And you highlight a very important point around decision making. And decision making definitely seems like it is at the heart of every organization. And AI is playing a transformative role here. So, Kree, can you share some real world examples of how AI has impacted decision making, especially in enablement teams or areas like HR, operations, or even client-facing areas like sales?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. When it comes to HR, a very common use case that I've found is where you have a chatbot of some sort that is enabled and stood up and is trained on a body of knowledge as it relates to like HR policies, practices, and even further augmented with things that are a lot more tuned to the persona who is using them. So you could go into this chatbot and you could say, hey, how many leave days do I have available to me for maternity? And it would come back and it would give you that as an answer without you needing to go and navigate your way through a policy or a document and really try and understand sometimes the technical or legal jargon that's in there, demystifying it into language that's easily consumable for you. The great thing about that is you can then build on that in terms of the context of the discussion And when you get your answer back, you could ask further questions to say, well, what if I wanted extra days? How would I go about doing that? And the LLM would be able to go back through the agent and be able to answer that as a question for you. So I found that to be one of the really great use cases, like a low point to entry, but delivers such substantial value to people. I'll give you a clear example as well. Last week we had an event, and I wanted to understand what were the T's and C's in terms of the things that I could do within the environment as it related to from an HR perspective. So I went into our agent and I actually asked our agent, and it came back and it said, well, here are the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. In the past, that would have taken me quite some time. I would have either had to go find the documents or find a subject matter expert and try and decipher this. And within the course of a few seconds, I was able to glean out an answer. From an operations standpoint, what I've seen, here's a really good use case and I think a fantastic use of the technology. We have a lot of unstructured data. So whilst there's knowledge that's captured in structured data in our organizations in terms of like toolkits and manuals, etc., there's also all of this unstructured data that really lives across things like Teams chats or like messages, in different places in the organization. I've seen a business actually take all of that and wrap it in underneath an AI agent so that you've now got access to this rich repository of information that really stems from the people in your business that are captured in all of these little pockets. It's good for two things. Number one, not just surfacing that intelligence, but critically for people that are new to the organization. They're sometimes a little bit hesitant to ask questions because they think it may end up making them look like they don't know what they're talking about. It creates a lot of safety for them to go and engage with this in natural language, ask those curious questions and get all the answers that they need. So it makes them operationally efficient much faster and delivers value to the organization ultimately in a quicker format. You can already see like the tie-in that you can have with people that are early in career in this guise as well. And then finally, from a sales point, oh, this is wonderful. It really helps us stitch together deep insights about customers from not just our repositories, but also things that are out there in connected systems. Now, when I need to do like strategic account planning as it relates to a customer and understand, hey, has this customer had mergers, acquisitions, and like tell me what's the latest about their financial reports. If I've got a well-structured prompt, I can pull all of that information back. It will look both internally within my ecosystem as well as externally into the web if I turn it on. And that, once again, doesn't just save me hours, it saves me potentially like days in my life. And the insights I'm then able to bring to the customer when I get across them in the table, it shows that I've got some level of proximity to what they're trying to achieve strategically, that I've got an understanding of their business. It sets a great baseline for us to have a really rich discussion.
Wow, those are amazing examples, and these examples also highlight the magnitude of change that we are witnessing today. So, could you also, for our audience, help us understand how this digital transformation efforts that organizations are going to go through today are different from any that we have embarked on in the past?
So I have a very interesting statistic, and I often ask people around this, especially when there's a wider audience. I say, anyone want to take a guess how long it took ChatGPT to reach 100 million users? You get varying answers, but the answer to the question is two. It took it 2 months to reach 100 million users. And that's 4 times faster than the previously fastest adopted technology, which was TikTok at the time. And I've got a chart that displays this. I'll share it with you. But all that it shows us is the rate of diffusion of these technologies moving into organizations is so fast. It's increasing all the time. So the next real big tech moment that we have will diffuse even faster. So this signifies a couple of things. Number one, our ability to be able to keep up with this kind of change as it relates to strategy, we've got to be hyper agile. Another wonderful question I like to ask customers or even partners when I engage with them is in 2023, just as we started to see this real emergence of ChatGPT, or like generative AI, if we want to loop it under that, how many of you had that as part of your strategy? I've not met a single customer or partner who said, yes, we had that as part of our strategy. So it just gives us a view that strategies need to be malleable, and the best ones are the ones that are able to adapt as time moves along. So no longer will we have the ability to have these very long range plans that we stick to rigidly. Yes, it's good to have longer range plans, but the strategy really will have to be flexible enough to account for the changes that are happening. I mean, just a short few months ago, we weren't even talking about agents, and now that becomes table stakes. So as the technology is starting to evolve and new things are unlocked for us, those that are quickest to find a way to assimilate it into their strategies and operationalize those or breathe life into it are really going to be the ones that succeed.
Absolutely. And also, for any transformation, it can only be as successful as the people driving it. So, preparing the workforce for an AI enabled future is super critical. So, Kreen, from your perspective, what skills and mindsets do you think are essential for employees in this new landscape? Because these are not small shifts. Like you mentioned, this is not just a robotic process automation. It is significantly changing our daily jobs, our roles, how we do work in our day-to-day work context today.
Yeah, I was having a discussion 2 days ago at dinner with a colleague of mine. She's recently joined Microsoft from LinkedIn, and we were talking about a podcast that we had both listened to, and it was speaking about the skills that people need for the future. And whilst we have deep reverence and respect for our educational institutions, this was a joint study that was done by LinkedIn. I think it was one of the large consulting houses. I think it may have been like Accenture or EY. In essence, what they said is the skills that will be prized in the future are going to be employees that have the ability to operate with a high degree of uncertainty when it comes to their roles, because the roles are going to be ever evolving, have the ability to go out and find various parts of information and knowledge bases, understand that, assimilate it, and start to implement it. So those are the skills that are going to be prized in the future. So having the ability to go and find courses, whether it's on like Udemy or LinkedIn Learning or even internal to your organization, for roles that are still being defined, understand them and get experimenting and move quickly. Those are definitely going to be a course set of skills. When I interview people now, I often test on a few dimensions. There are 3 things, and I think that these will become like hyper valuable. So like the type of attitude that you bring and, being a culture contributor, etc. Your aptitude, your ability to learn, and not just learn, but relearn. That's going to be fundamentally critical. And the final one is change. Do you have the ability to be disrupted and go through change and be productive very quickly, knowing that you're going to be disrupted again? I think those 3 things are going to be absolutely fundamental. And further to that, AI literacy really is a critical component. And by that, it's understanding AI's capabilities, its limitations, because that's going to be critical for every single employee. Equally important are these aspects of adaptability, problem solving, and collaboration, because it will align the human creativity with AI efficiencies. Leadership, however, need to be at the forefront of that change, driving the cultural renaissance that we need to ensure that there's psychological safety for these people to experiment in a very safe manner and fail forward in those exploits.
And from your experiences talking to people, do you see that leaders are ready to give that sandbox for people to experiment in, or provide that psychologically safe environment and not get into hand slapping if an experiment fails?
Yeah, that's a very smart question, by the way. And I'm smiling wryly at this because right now, I think it really depends on the industry that you're in. and the type of leader that you've got ultimately. I mean, it is always down to the human on the other side. Um, in the tech industry, there's a lot of acceptance in terms of that and a push for more and more experimentation. You may get into other environments where it's a lot more regulated. Legal, as an example, comes to mind straight away. And often what I've seen right now is because this change has happened so fast and it's hit people, there's so much happening from every single provider. Those that are not within the IT landscape or the tech landscape, they're quite frankly, they're paralyzed by all of this. There's stuff coming from Microsoft, from AWS, from Google, from OpenAI, and a slew of other ISVs. So they don't sometimes necessarily understand how to make that change. So what have they done? They're like, oh my God, this is a huge change. I don't quite understand it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to outlaw this right now. It's like you can't use these technologies because they're so powerful, and we don't want you taking any of our corporate information and using it on a system that may end up proliferating beyond our control. That is a flawed approach, however, because people will experiment. And there's a stat from a survey that has been done that shows that 80% of employees are experimenting with these technologies. So the tie back into your original part of the question in terms of leadership is leaders need to acknowledge this, that outlawing it isn't a practice. Shadow AI is happening. The sooner you create a safe space and you allow people to come in with their tools, you can work responsibly with them to develop policies, procedures, enablement to walk towards this in a very systematic way that's safe not just for the employees, but also for the organization.
Absolutely. And again, given that you have access to so many organizations who are on this journey of AI implementation, who is driving this conversation about creating those safe spaces or giving even access to the right technologies for people to play with? Is it IT, or is it the business coming to IT, or is it a joint effort from your perspective?
It has to be a joint effort, but really it has to be business more than that. Like business has the greatest stake in terms of this. And then often they've got to wrangle with IT to get them on board, because also for IT, it's a massive learning curve. And they're often evaluating this through the lens of risk. And the reason, and understandably so, is because for the first time, for this to work properly, it needs access to our data, and not just some data, but all of our data. And if security protocols are not in place, not just for internal, but externally, if your data estate is not in place in the right format, you're not going to be able to leverage this technology to the best of its capabilities. And quite critically, from a security standpoint, if we have to just take a step back for a second, Sweta, legacy hackers or threat actors, once they got access to your environment, they'd have to poke around for some time before they could really drain everything out of your environment. Now, if you've got an AI agent that's really reasoned over all of the information within the environment, pretty much all that you need is to be able to access that AI agent. And you could put in a very well-structured prompt that will give you all of the information that you need. So the opportunity to go from, threat all the way through to actual breach becomes much, much faster in those environments. So I can understand sometimes when IT is a little bit reticent, but to answer the question directly, it really has to come from leadership and business overall, roping in IT and then moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that highlights and underscores the point that leaders have to be, educated about what's coming their way from a technology perspective. And in my humble opinion, I would say if there are safe ways to start experimenting with technology, the more we experiment and be hands-on with different tools available to us, the faster we can close our imagination gap on, hallucinates, fine, but it also does so many other things where we can reap the benefits of efficiency and expertise from tools versus leaning on internal expertise in other ways. But you also mentioned another interesting point that I would like us to talk about: AI agents. I know Microsoft has Salesforce talked about it, Anthropic talked about agents, and now recently OpenAI has come up with AI agents. So can you help us understand what are AI agents? How are they different from Gen AI? And then we can get into a little bit more about AI agents.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time in the world where, if I go back to what we had spoken about, RPA really was about this promise of taking well-defined processes and automating them as far as possible. The challenge with RPA was that it wasn't particularly good at handling like edge cases when things were not very well defined.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to agents of today, they're able to go and take a large portion of like unstructured or like potentially not even well-formed queries, convert those into well-formed queries, and derive the meaning out of what needs to be done and go and effectively act on that. That's the best part about agents. That's the fundamental difference for me between agents of today and RPA, because many people say, well, we've always had RPA, so what's really different about it?
Mm-hmm.
The empowerment that these agents have now to be able to connect to various systems and being able to take action on them is really what's starting to drive a lot of curiosity and experimentation from organizations. I still strongly believe there always has to be a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this is Microsoft's stance as well, which is the reason we refer to our technology as Copilot and not the pilot, because you always still need a human in the loop. But there's a large amount of work that can be offboarded, largely repetitive, manual type tasks, things that, if well trained, an agent can take that and execute on it. Up until a few days ago, we only had the ability for agents to work in sequence. We can now have agents operating in parallel. And the way that I see this happening in the future is you won't just necessarily have like one or two agents. You'll have agents that are very discrete in terms of what they're performing across a business use case or a line of business function. So you'll have the ability then to take those discrete services or those agents. They'll become very deep and very smart in terms of that particular domain, and you can stitch them across your business. So if HR has a need for that agent, as does finance, etc., they can stitch parts of those agents together to then fulfill on a business process. Ultimately, what it's going to do, yes, it will displace some of the human capacity, 100%, but it's going to make us a lot more productive and drive a lot more efficiency for us. Ultimately, where we'll end up, and as we move further and further on in this, OpenAI defined like the 5 stages that you need before you get to artificial general intelligence. And one of them is really when agents have the ability to do the work of an entire organization. But we're still a way away from that.
Well, till we reach that end state, at least in the interim states, looks like the future of hybrid workforce is not in person or remote. It is a hybrid workforce of humans, of machines, robots, and autonomous systems who are doing and acting on behalf of humans. So that's a very interesting phase that we are getting into. But how long do you think we have till this hybrid workforce kicks in? Like agents are like, we're talking about agents all the time, but are we really ready to implement agents, or are we in early stages, or it depends on the maturity of an organization? What do you think?
I think it very much depends on the maturity of an organization and their ability to like assimilate change in a responsible way and experiment without necessarily breaking the bank. And right now you can create very small and discrete agents. Like if you think about our latest release that we had, like I created an agent the other day for some people that literally took me 2 minutes to do. And the essence of the agent was the following. It says, hey, imagine that you're like this hyper skilled negotiator, leverage our sales methodology and use these bodies of knowledge in terms of these best practices as it comes to like negotiation and objection handling, and take my proposal that I've got, or even free text that I put into the chat, and help challenge me on this and give me varying levels that you want to challenge me at that I can choose from, like a light challenge to something that's a very strong challenge on this. And then coach me through this, tell me what was good about this, and then offer me like material based on that body of knowledge that I can then go and learn about to go and upskill myself. That agent literally took me about 7 or 8 minutes to go and construct and write. And I think about the value that that can add then to an entire sales force. Right?
Yeah.
It's immense. It's immense. So when I think about like, are we ready for it? We're ready for agents that are small and light, that can form parts of like little parts of the business process or help us become better at things. There is definitely a case in some organizations for offloading more and more and complex things into agentive functions and ultimately allowing them to reason over much more. I can't give you a clear answer in terms of how long that will take to happen for sure. I do have a theory though, and this is purely my theory. I wonder if at a point in time that our value proposition, when I say ours, me as like an employee or even as a consultant, will be not just me as like the biological form, but me together with agents that are so well attuned to who I am, that really understand me, my persona, my leadership philosophy, my sales approach, etc. All the things that I think really are the value prop that I bring, that are so well tuned to that I can then take with me as my value proposition to whichever customer or client or organization I go to. It's like we'll be walking around with these agents, obviously digital versions of them, that then augment us as our value proposition. Just a thought.
Oh, wow. It just made me think, instead of then us sending our PDF resume to the organizations, we would be sending whatever our agentic makeup of our digital footprint looks like to organizations so that they can assess their value in terms of how are we going to contribute through our augmented agentic selves to the organization.
Yeah. And that then becomes your value prop. When you leave the organization, you and your agent go along together.
Wow. Yeah. Also, when you were talking about agents, I was wondering, the example you gave was where you created your agent. Is that how organizations who are thinking about experimenting with agents should be thinking about agents, that let's just start at individual level? Or is it somebody else coming in, assessing my workflow, and then deciding which parts of my workflow can be agentified, for lack of better terms?
There's a case for both. So let's start with the first one. Probably not the answer you were looking for, but if we start with the first, like the use case that I described, I mean, yes, I do come from a technical background, but if I had to close my eyes and think about how I did that, there wasn't any real need for me to lean on my technical background. The beauty about the agents that we can create today through things like Copilot Studio is I can use natural language to describe the agent. So I could write out exactly what I just said to you, and it has the ability to then say, oh, okay, I need to go and connect to this. Okay, that's the source for like our sales methodology. Oh, here's the list of books and the repository that you want me to go and focus on as it relates to negotiation. That's why it took me like 7 minutes, because literally I typed in the text in terms of this is what I want you to do. It went off and it did the work for me. So if you think about that, the entry level for anyone to be able to build an agent, like the bar for entry is very low. You just need to be able to describe what you want with as much detail as you possibly can. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get the output that you want. So there's a case for that, for like people to go and experiment and like see representations of things that are that are sometimes challenging for them to be agentified just to make their world and their lives easier. That's one. The second one is the piece that you had asked for. Is like, yes, it's always great to get a consultant in, somebody who's able to go and dissect your business process and say, there's massive value in being able to do this, not just for one person, but across an ecosystem of people. So, and I always try and think of it in terms of this consulting model, which is like value bubbles, and like the size of your bubble indicating how much of value you can derive out of implementing that. And then it's across an axis of time and value at the top. So shortest amount of time with the highest amount of value is probably the use case that you should go for first.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that with us. Also, I'm just kind of now imagining a future with you and with the knowledge and insights that you have about AI. If we imagine living in 2030, how do you imagine the world of work in 2030?
Wow, it's an interesting one. So hard to say. I mean, one of the aspects, I think I kind of gave you a view in terms of like what my future could possibly look like in terms of this AI agent that kind of walks alongside with you. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in 5 years, a heck of a lot is going to happen. And if I have to think about like workplace of the future, like in be less ambitious terms, they'll feature AI as a core collaborator rather than just a tool. Right now, it's very much a tool.
Mm-hmm.
AI agents are going to handle like very complex tasks. They're going to help employees like really to focus on things that are deeply important to us: strategy, creativity, innovation. We'll have these hybrid teams that will comprise humans and AI, and they'll help us in our decision making by combining like AI's precision together with human intuition. And I think that's the magic mix. If we can do that, like the precision that AI can give us with the ability to reason over pretty much everything we've created, and human intuition, which AI doesn't have, we'll see these very immersive collaboration spaces that will be powered by AI, like which will really blur the lines then between like physical and digital, making like remote and global teamwork very, very seamless in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge, however, and when I think about this, and when you have these very rich, immersive experiences that are probably going to be even richer than the physical world we live in, will really lie in maintaining human connection whilst still embracing the technology.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, sometimes I wonder, or I feel like jumping into 2030 and taking a peek at what the world would look like then, because to your point, there are many futures that are possible. There are so many things that are still unknown, uncertain. We haven't fully mapped out where we are going, but one thing based on what you shared for sure is going to happen is the world is going to look different by 2030. And we are already on a journey. AI is something that is happening and is not going to stop happening tomorrow. So, with that in mind, as we wrap up our episode, what are the key takeaways you'd like to leave our audience regarding decision making, regarding transformation, and preparing for an AI driven workplace?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you ever so much for creating space with very thoughtful questions and allowing me to share a little bit in terms of my point of view. When I think about that question, number one, there are three things I'll touch on. Number one is embrace. Don't think of AI as a threat, but really as this tool right now to augment our human potential. There are two ways to think about it, and I often try and frame things like this for myself as well, which is a fear-based mindset presents itself as scarcity, whereas an abundance mindset presents as growth and opportunity. So let's index towards the latter on that front. The second thing is around adaptability. So be really open to the change and prioritize learning. Be curious about that and be open to disrupting yourself, not just once, but constantly, and become comfortable with that in terms of the feelings and the emotions and the process as well. Because if I go back to some of the answers I provided earlier, those really are going to be the things that define whether we as individuals are able to assimilate this change and really thrive in the world that's pulling us towards it. And the third thing is innovate. Start experimenting and using AI to create new possibilities, not just to improve existing processes. Look beyond that. Call to action here as well is for our leaders to inspire their teams and see AI as a partner, fostering this culture of curiosity and experimentation, and critically psychological safety. Keeping people, employees curious and proactive about AI's capabilities will really ensure relevance in this ever-evolving landscape.
Well said, Kree. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights on the AI driven workplace. This conversation has been incredibly enlightening, and I'm sure our audience has gained practical takeaways on how AI is impacting our day to day lives at work and what kind of future can we envision together so that we can do the things that are necessary to get there with the least amount of bruises and bumps. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to TIDES for more engaging conversations about innovation and the future of work. Until next time, stay curious and keep transforming.